What's up, lore masters? This is the second part of my On Trial series regarding the Maquis. In the first episode, I discussed the elements that would ultimately cause for their creation. If you want to really appreciate what the Maquis had went through and thus what they would continue to do, I would encourage you to check out that first. Link is in the description and top right hand corner. With that out of the way, let's just get into it. A comment I see coming up consistently is the counter that the Federation colonists were no longer Federation citizens. This is due to a statement given by Picard in the TNG episode Journey's End. In this episode, the colonists give up their status as Federation citizens in order to be able to stay where they are. While it's fair to bring this up, in almost every other instance where we see the Maquis, they are treated as Federation colonists and citizens. In fact, 2 episodes later in TNG's Preemptive Strike, Picard calls the Maquis Federation citizens. In the Deep Space Nine episode The Maquis Part 2, the same admiral that is in Journey's End calls the Maquis Federation citizens. And finally, in the first 30 seconds of the first episode of Voyager, Caretaker, they are called Federation colonists. At best, the assumption here is that the colonists on that specific planet gave up their citizenship, which makes the episode worse given its connotations and the ethnicity of the colonists themselves. However, for my money, it seems more likely that even though this was the original agreement, the Federation either never revoked their status as citizens, or future discussions would have that status reinstated. I would almost say that Picard's statement was probably retconned as it didn't make for as much drama in future episodes. After all, if all of these people were Cardassian subjects and had no Federation standing, why would the Cardassians go to war with the Federation when the Federation had nothing to do with it? And on top of that, why would the Federation care if the Cardassian was punishing its subjects or even killing them? Remember, they put up with the Dominion. Either way, the Federation colonists, some of them at least, would ultimately begin openly rebelling against the Cardassian. Memory Alpha states that the first open hostilities with the Maquis occurred at Deep Space Nine with the attack on the freighter Bac Nor. While I will agree this is the first time we see hostilities on screen, dialogue honestly leads me to believe that it's quite likely hostilities had begun ever since the signing of the treaty. Though after the attack on the Bac Nor, we would see the Maquis plot future raids against the Cardassians, and it would only heat up from there. To paraphrase Gul Dukat, they had started their own mini-war. Though it is debatable they didn't have help from either side. This brings an interesting question. How did the Maquis get the weapons that they did? We do know that they scraped from what they could find, that they used third-party arms deals, and for my money, I believe that Section 31 was assisting them as well. In the DS9 episode, The Maquis Part 1, Sisko is surprised that a vessel as small as the Federation colonists' ship would have photon torpedoes. I'm not saying that it's impossible that the colonists didn't get these weapons via weapon sellers, but I think that Section 31 could see the advantage of continually having a destabilized and off-kilter Cardassian Union. I also have a conspiracy theory that Section 31 orchestrated this entire event to free Bajor, but I'm going to save that for my conspiracy video where I bring all of the conspiracies together. As stated, for at least 3 years, Federation colonies would have to deal with Cardassian aggression. However, to be fair, the fighting did seem pretty cyclical. The Cardassians killed Maquis, and the Maquis killed the Cardassians, and no one wins. What's intriguing to me is that the Federation colonies would slowly stop being considered Federation colonies by most and would be considered Maquis colonies. In fact, it would be so bad that the captain of a warship would consider all Federation colonies in the DMZ to be Maquis colonies, and he would begin bombing planets, forcing evacuations just to capture one man. Now, this point has always been very vague to me and one that is pretty important as a distinction in my opinion. Again, with the exception of Journey's End, everyone considers these people Federation citizens, or at least Federation colonists. That's why the Federation is so keen on stopping them. However, when it comes to punishing them or stopping them, the entirety of the people are considered Maquis terrorists. This opens up 2 very real, very unfortunate circumstances. Either the Federation colonies have been left alone and had to band together to form their own nation, or the conditions were so bad that a terrorist group infiltrated the overall governments and were utilizing those colonies' resources and keeping the populace in poverty to fight a war with the Cardassians. Of course, it couldn't be the latter. That would mean that Ben Sisko would be putting innocent civilians in the line of fire. Nope, I guess they're all just Maquis, because we gotta consider an entirety of people one thing, am I right? As we've discussed, tensions would rise greatly when the Bach Nor, a Cardassian freighter, was bombed near Deep Space Nine. Only a week later, Gul Dukat, an influential Gul in the Cardassian Union, was captured and interrogated by the Maquis. During this time, an attack on Brima, a former Cardassian colony, would be thwarted by Federation assets. Even though the Maquis were stopped, Starfleet determined that the Cardassian Union was supplying military-grade weapons to the Cardassian colonists in the DMZ. This would cause a huge uproar as Starfleet forces immediately came to the aid of Federation citizens. The Federation would lodge an official complaint and put a huge amount of pressure on the Cardassian Union to pay reparations to the colonists. Nothing would happen. Not one single fucking thing. Even though the Cardassian Union quite blatantly are bringing weapons of war into a zone that is supposed to be demilitarized, the Federation would ensure it had on its knee pads to prevent chafing and then wipe its lips after the Cardassians were done saying, "Thank you, sir, may I have another?" And during all this time, letting people continue to die. This would obviously not sit well with a lot of the galaxy. There would be a stream of defecting Starfleet officers as well as people from other governments and nations, including but not limited to species such as Vulcans, Klingons, Betazoids, and others. With knowledgeable Starfleet officers and species from around the galaxy, the Maquis would slowly begin to gain ground against the Cardassian colonists, as well as the Cardassian Union. The treaty would also, at least in theory, prevent large-scale movement of military assets on either side from moving in to stop the Maquis. Just to clarify here, the Wondrous Federation agrees to a treaty that not only creates a terrorist organization, but prevents Starfleet and Cardassian forces from actually being able to stop them. Just fantastically done. From around 2370 to 2372, the Maquis would solidify their power base and have effective, complete control of the demilitarized zone. A Maquis state was realized, unofficially, for a time at least. It's here that we find ourselves at another crossroads on what people think and believe about the Maquis. The original culmination of the Maquis was to fight Cardassian oppression and to create a state that was free of Federation hypocrisy and Cardassian hostility. However, the Maquis didn't stop at gaining control of the DMZ, but began a campaign of terror against Cardassian colonists. We see this in the bombing of Cardassian planets to force Cardassian colonists to leave, and the capturing of the USS Defiant to begin attacks against the Cardassian Union directly, and the alliance with the Klingons in the Klingon-Cardassian War. At some point, it stopped being about being free of oppression and became hurting Cardassians. We see this mentality perfectly in the DS9 episode Blaze of Glory, where Eddington discusses the amazing military victories that the Maquis had, and Sisko points out how it led to the Cardassians running into the arms of the Dominion. Ultimately, the Maquis would be wiped out in 2373 by the Dominion. And I have to be honest, I do somewhat sympathize with the Cardassians. Sure, the Cardassians had been the oppressors, but now the Maquis were going after people who had nothing to do with that. They were going after Cardassian civilians. And this was at a point when the Cardassians couldn't defend themselves. This was purely trying to hurt the Cardassian Union and its people. It's somewhat ironic when you consider. The Maquis had popped up in a legitimate response to oppression and had ultimately become the oppressors, kicking people while they were down. I've said this in other videos, but I believe that the Maquis had the chance to truly form their own government, and they could have in fact even signed agreements with the Dominion, the Federation, the Klingons, and others to become legitimized. So ultimately, in this situation, neither side is really without sin. Both went too far, and both are legitimized in what they did, up to a point. But those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below.